My name is Scarlett Chen. I'm 26 years old, and I thought marrying into a family meant they would accept me as their own, until my mother-in-law looked at my beloved golden retriever and said, "Scarlett loves that dog more than family." What happened next? Proved that while I was working as a veterinarian to save animals' lives and build a future with her son, my husband's mother was planning to murder my dog with rat poison because she saw my bond with my pet as competition for her control over the family. Before I tell you how one necropsy report changed everything, my family thought they knew about my dog's sudden death and how veterinary toxicology exposed a deliberate poisoning so cruel it shocked even experienced investigators. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how 3 words "deliberate poisoning" confirmed silenced my entire family and made them realize they had welcomed a murderer into their home who killed an innocent animal out of pure hatred. Let me take you back to where this story really begins. I'm a veterinarian who specializes in emergency and critical care, working at one of the busiest animal hospitals in our city. My job involves saving the lives of injured and sick animals, often in life or death situations that require quick thinking and advanced medical intervention. My love for animals began in childhood and led me through 8 years of rigorous education to become a doctor of veterinary medicine. Every day at work, I see the incredible bond between pets and their families, and I understand how devastating it is for people when they lose a beloved animal companion. 3 years ago, I adopted Max, a 2-year-old golden retriever from a local rescue organization. Max had been surrendered by his previous family when they moved and couldn't take him with them. He was healthy, well-trained, and had the most gentle, loving personality I had ever encountered in a dog. "He's perfect," I told the rescue coordinator when I first met Max. "He's exactly the kind of companion I've been hoping to find." Max and I bonded immediately. He was intelligent, affectionate, and seemed to understand that I worked in veterinary medicine. He was always calm and well-behaved around other animals, making him the perfect companion for someone in my profession. 2 years ago, I met my husband David at a charity fundraiser for animal welfare. David worked as an engineer and seemed genuinely interested in my work and passionate about animal welfare causes. "I've always loved dogs," David told me during our first conversation. "I think what you do as a veterinarian is incredible." David quickly bonded with Max, taking him on hikes, playing fetch in the park, and treating him like the family member he had become. "Max is such a great dog," David would say. "I can't imagine our life without him." After dating for 18 months, David proposed, and I was excited about building a life together with someone who shared my love for animals and understood the importance of my veterinary career. But from the moment David introduced me to his mother, Margaret, I sensed hostility that I couldn't understand or explain. Margaret was a 58-year-old widow who had been very close to David since his father's death 5 years earlier. She lived alone in the house where David had grown up and seemed to view any woman in David's life as competition for his attention and affection. "So you're the veterinarian," Margaret said when we first met, her tone suggesting that my profession was somehow problematic. "Yes, I work in emergency and critical care," I replied, trying to be friendly and professional. "That must be very time-consuming," Margaret observed. "David needs someone who can prioritize family over work." The comment stung because it implied that my dedication to saving animals' lives was somehow selfish or incompatible with being a good wife. Margaret's hostility toward me intensified when she met Max. "You certainly are attached to that dog," she said, watching Max and me interact during our first visit to her house. "Max is family to me," I replied. "I rescued him 3 years ago, and we've been inseparable ever since." "Dogs are animals, not family," Margaret stated coldly. "People who treat animals like children usually have problems forming proper human relationships." The cruelty of her comment was shocking, especially since she was speaking to a veterinarian whose career was dedicated to animal welfare. But Margaret's hostility toward Max seemed to go beyond general dislike of animals. She appeared to view my bond with Max as a threat to her relationship with David. "David used to spend every Sunday with me before he started dating you," Margaret complained during one family dinner. "Now he's always busy with you and that dog." "We always invite you to join us for activities," I replied diplomatically. "I don't want to be a third wheel to you and your pet," Margaret shot back. Over time, Margaret's comments about Max became more pointed and disturbing. "That dog sheds all over David's clothes," she would complain. "Max gets groomed regularly and is very well maintained," I would respond. "Dogs carry diseases that can be transmitted to humans," Margaret would state inaccurately. "As a veterinarian, I can assure you that Max is healthy and up to date on all vaccinations," I would explain. But Margaret wasn't interested in facts about animal health or pet care. She seemed determined to find reasons to criticize Max and, by extension, criticize me for loving him. The situation escalated when David and I got married last year. Margaret made it clear that she disapproved of Max being part of our wedding celebration. "Dogs don't belong at weddings," she announced when we discussed our ceremony plans. "Max is family, and we want him to be part of our special day," David explained, supporting my desire to include Max in our wedding. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Margaret replied angrily. "Scarlett puts that animal before human family. She's turning David against his own mother." Margaret's opposition to Max being in our wedding revealed the depth of her resentment toward both Max and me. She saw my love for my dog as evidence that I was somehow deficient as a wife and daughter-in-law. Despite Margaret's objections, Max was part of our wedding ceremony, wearing a special collar and walking down the aisle as our ring bearer. The photos from that day show Max looking handsome and happy, surrounded by people who loved him. But Margaret's hostility toward Max and me continued to escalate after the wedding. During family gatherings at her house, Margaret would make pointed comments about Max's presence. "I suppose the dog has to come to every family event," she would say with obvious irritation. "Max is well behaved and enjoys being around family," I would reply. "Dogs don't belong indoors with people eating," Margaret would continue. "Max is house-trained and knows not to beg for food," David would explain, defending both Max and me. Margaret's criticism of Max became so frequent and hostile that David and I began limiting our visits to her house, which only increased her resentment. "David never visits anymore because of that woman and her dog," I overheard Margaret telling a neighbor during one awkward encounter. The tension reached a breaking point 6 months ago when Margaret made a comment that revealed the true extent of her feelings. "Scarlett loves that dog more than family," Margaret announced during a Sunday dinner. "She treats an animal better than she treats her own husband's mother." "Mom, that's not fair," David replied. "Scarlett treats you with respect, and Max is part of our family." "Animals are not family," Margaret stated emphatically. The fact that David's wife can't understand that shows she has her priorities completely wrong. The dinner ended tensely, and David and I left feeling frustrated and hurt by Margaret's continued hostility. "I don't understand why my mother can't accept Max," David told me on the drive home. "He's a wonderful dog, and he makes us happy." "I think she sees Max as competition for your attention," I replied. "She wants to be the most important thing in your life, and our family, including Max, threatens that." Over the next few months, we tried to maintain a relationship with Margaret while protecting Max from her hostility. We brought Max to family gatherings but kept him close to us to avoid giving Margaret opportunities to criticize his behavior. But 3 months ago, Margaret's hostility toward Max took a form that I never could have anticipated. David and I were both working late on a Tuesday evening when Margaret called to say she wanted to stop by our house to drop off some family photos for our wedding album. "I'll be quick," Margaret promised. "I just want to leave these photos on your kitchen table." We gave Margaret our spare key and told her Max would be in the backyard and wouldn't bother her while she was inside. When David and I got home around 9 p.m., Max was lying in the backyard, vomiting and appearing extremely lethargic. "Something's wrong with Max," I told David immediately. As a veterinarian, I could see that Max was showing signs of serious illness that required immediate medical attention. Max's symptoms included vomiting, diarrhea, excessive drooling, difficulty breathing, and loss of coordination. These were classic signs of poisoning, but I couldn't imagine how Max could have been exposed to toxic substances in our safely enclosed backyard. "We need to get him to the emergency clinic immediately," I told David. I called my colleagues at the emergency animal hospital and rushed Max in for treatment. Despite aggressive supportive care, including IV fluids, anti-nausea medications, and monitoring, Max's condition continued to deteriorate rapidly. "Scarlett, I'm sorry, but Max isn't responding to treatment," my colleague Dr. Martinez told me after several hours of intensive care. His symptoms are consistent with severe toxic exposure, but we need to identify the specific poison to provide targeted treatment. What kind of toxic exposure could cause these symptoms? I asked, though as a veterinarian, I already suspected the answer. Based on the presentation, this appears to be consistent with rodenticide poisoning, Dr. Martinez replied. The symptoms match anticoagulant rat poison, which prevents blood clotting and causes internal bleeding. Rat poison. Someone had given Max rat poison. Despite our best efforts, Max passed away at 3 a.m., 6 hours after we discovered him sick in our backyard. The loss was devastating. Max had been my constant companion for 5 years, my best friend, and a beloved family member who had brought joy and love into my life every single day. But beyond the grief, I was haunted by the question of how Max could have been exposed to rat poison in our secure backyard. Dr. Chen, I'm so sorry for your loss, Dr. Martinez said after Max's death. Given the circumstances and the specific type of poisoning, I recommend that you consider having a necropsy performed to determine exactly how Max was exposed. A necropsy is the animal equivalent of an autopsy, and as a veterinarian, I knew it was the only way to get definitive answers about what had killed Max. I want to know exactly what happened, I told Dr. Martinez. Max was healthy this morning, and our yard is secure. This doesn't make sense unless someone deliberately poisoned him. The necropsy was performed by Dr. Lisa Wong, a veterinary pathologist who specializes in determining causes of death in animals. Dr. Chen, I'm calling with the necropsy results, Dr. Wong said 3 days later. I need to discuss some very concerning findings. What did you find? I asked, though I was dreading the answer. Max died from acute anticoagulant rodenticide poisoning, Dr. Wong confirmed. The toxicology analysis shows extremely high levels of Brodifacoum, a powerful rat poison, in his blood and tissue samples. How much poison was involved? I asked. The concentration levels indicate that Max consumed a lethal dose of rat poison that was likely mixed with food to make it palatable, Dr. Wong explained. This wasn't accidental exposure from eating a poisoned rat or finding poison pellets. Someone fed Max a substantial amount of rat poison mixed with something he would willingly eat. The necropsy results confirmed what I had feared. Max had been deliberately murdered. Dr. Wong, is there any possibility this was accidental? I asked, hoping against hope that there might be an innocent explanation. Dr. Chen, based on the toxicology findings and the presentation, this was definitely intentional poisoning, Dr. Wong replied. The amount of poison and the delivery method indicate that someone specifically targeted Max with the intent to kill him. I was shaking as I processed the necropsy results. Someone had deliberately murdered my dog with rat poison, and they had done it on the day Margaret had access to our house and yard. That evening, I called the police to report Max's murder and request an investigation. This is Detective James Rodriguez, the officer said when he returned my call. I understand you want to report animal cruelty involving the poisoning of your dog. Detective Rodriguez, I'm a veterinarian, and I have necropsy results proving that my dog was deliberately poisoned with rat poison, I explained. I believe this was intentional animal cruelty that should be investigated as a crime. Do you have any suspects or theories about who might have done this? Detective Rodriguez asked. I explained the timeline of Margaret's visit to our house, her history of hostility toward Max, and the fact that Max had been healthy until the evening Margaret had access to our property. Dr. Chen, animal poisoning cases can be difficult to prosecute without direct evidence, Detective Rodriguez explained, but given that you have a veterinary expert opinion and necropsy results, we'll open an investigation. We'll need to interview potential suspects and gather evidence about who had access to your property and motives for harming your dog. 2 days later, Detective Rodriguez called Margaret to request an interview about Max's death. Margaret's reaction to the police inquiry was telling. I don't know why the police are asking me about that dog, Margaret told David after Detective Rodriguez contacted her. Scarlett is being dramatic and trying to blame me for an accident. Mom, this wasn't an accident, David explained. The necropsy showed that Max was deliberately poisoned with rat poison. Well, maybe the dog got into something he shouldn't have, Margaret replied dismissively. Dogs eat garbage all the time, But Margaret's story began to change when Detective Rodriguez pressed her for details about her visit to our house. Initially, Margaret claimed she had never entered our backyard and had only been inside the house for a few minutes. But when Detective Rodriguez asked about her access to the backyard, Margaret admitted that she had gone outside to check on the dog because she was concerned about his behavior. "I wanted to make sure the dog was okay while David and Scarlett were at work," Margaret told Detective Rodriguez. "What did you do when you checked on the dog?" Detective Rodriguez asked. "I just looked to see if he had food and water," Margaret replied. "Did you give the dog anything to eat or drink?" Margaret hesitated before answering. "I might have given him some treats that were on the kitchen counter." Detective Rodriguez's investigation revealed that Margaret had purchased rat poison from a hardware store 2 days before visiting our house, paying cash, and providing false identification information. Security footage from the store showed Margaret specifically asking the clerk about the most effective rat poison and questioning whether it was fast-acting. "Ma'am, this is the strongest rat poison we carry," the clerk was recorded saying. "It's very effective, but you need to be careful around pets because it's extremely toxic to dogs and cats." "That's not a concern," Margaret replied on the recording. The combination of Margaret's rat poison purchase, her access to our house and yard, her admission to feeding Max treats, and her history of hostility toward Max provided sufficient evidence for criminal charges. Margaret was arrested 2 weeks after Max's death and charged with animal cruelty in the first degree, which is a felony in our state. The evidence shows that Margaret Williams deliberately purchased rat poison and used it to kill her daughter-in-law's dog, the prosecutor announced during the arraignment. This was not a crime of passion or an accidental poisoning. This was premeditated animal cruelty motivated by personal animosity. Margaret initially tried to claim that Max's death was accidental and that she had only been trying to help with a rodent problem at our house. But the prosecutor's case was strengthened by the necropsy results, the store security footage, and testimony from family members about Margaret's hostility toward Max. The defendant's own statements to family members show a pattern of resentment and hostility toward the victim's dog, the prosecutor explained to the jury. She viewed the dog as competition for her son's attention and made repeated statements about wanting the dog removed from the family. Margaret eventually pleaded guilty to animal cruelty charges in exchange for a reduced sentence, though her crime still carried serious consequences. She was sentenced to 3 years in state prison, 5 years of probation, ordered to pay $10,000 in restitution for Max's medical care and necropsy costs, and banned from owning or caring for animals for the rest of her life. But the most significant consequence for Margaret was the complete destruction of her relationship with David. "I can't believe my mother murdered Scarlett's dog," David told me after Margaret's conviction. "Max was innocent and loving, and she killed him out of hatred for you. I don't know if I can ever forgive her for what she did," David continued. "She didn't just kill Max, she destroyed our family and showed that she's capable of cruelty I never imagined." David has had no contact with Margaret since her arrest and has made it clear that she will never be welcome in our home or lives again. If she could murder an innocent animal out of jealousy, what else might she be capable of? David asked during one of our conversations about the situation. "I can't trust someone who would poison a defenseless dog because she didn't like her daughter-in-law. The most important lesson I learned from this devastating experience is that some people will commit horrific acts of cruelty when they feel their control over family relationships is threatened." Margaret saw my bond with Max as evidence that she was losing influence over David, and she chose to murder an innocent animal rather than accept that her son had his own family priorities. I also learned that animal cruelty investigations require the same level of evidence and documentation as any other criminal case, and that having professional expertise helped build a strong case against Margaret. The woman whose mother-in-law said she loves that dog more than family learned that some people will murder innocent animals out of pure hatred and jealousy, but that veterinary science can expose their crimes and bring them to justice. And the mother-in-law, who thought she could eliminate her perceived competition by poisoning a defenseless dog, learned that animal cruelty is a serious felony that can result in prison time and the permanent loss of family relationships. Today, David and I are slowly healing from the trauma of Max's murder, though we miss him every day. We've adopted two new rescue dogs who bring joy and love into our home, and we honor Max's memory by supporting animal welfare organizations and advocating for stronger animal cruelty laws. Margaret remains in prison, serving her sentence for murdering an innocent animal whose only crime was being loved by someone she resented. Sometimes the most important thing families can learn is that love isn't a competition, and that anyone willing to murder an innocent animal to maintain control over relationships has already lost whatever they were trying to protect. Have you ever dealt with family members who saw your pets as threats to their relationships? How do you protect your animals from people who might harm them out of jealousy or hatred? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about animal cruelty, justice, family betrayal, and learning that veterinary science can expose even the most calculating animal murderers.